This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Justice Pending. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan. And today we're diving into one of the most chilling, confounding serial killer cases in modern American history. His name was Israel Keyes, and unlike many serial killers we've covered, he didn't have a signature, no victim profile, no local hunting ground. He was methodical, organized, and terrifyingly random.
This is a man who crisscrossed the country, burying kill kits years in advance, boxes filled with weapons, zip ties, Drano, and cash, just waiting for the right opportunity. When the time came, he'd fly across the states, rent a car, dig up his stash, and find someone to kill, then disappear without a trace.
Authorities believe he murdered at least 11 people between 2001 and 2012, but he was only definitively linked to 3. Samantha Koenig in Alaska and Bill and Lorraine Currier in Vermont. The rest, still unknown.
So let's rewind. Israel Keyes was born in 1978 in Utah, the second of 10 kids. His parents were fiercely anti-government and deeply religious. At one point, they even joined a church called the Ark that has some ties to white supremacy.
Yeah, his childhood, as you could imagine, was isolated, to put it mildly. He grew up without electricity or heat, roaming the woods of Washington state, and by his own admission, he was torturing animals and fantasizing about violence by the time he was a teenager. At 14, he realized he didn't see the world the way other people did, and that was just fine with him.
So it was around 1997 or 1998 when he abducted and raped a teenage girl near Maupin, Oregon. He later told investigators he let her go, but that was the last time he'd ever make that decision, something he'd later call a mistake.
Keyes joined the Army in 1998, which also terrifies me.
Yes.
He served at Fort Hood, Fort Lewis, and even spent time in Egypt. Also, something that just kind of keeps me up at night, he received an Army Achievement Medal. But behind that uniform was a man quietly planning his future crimes.
I mean, it actually makes sense that he would be like a trained killer, knowing what he would eventually do. Of course, most of the people, the vast majority who are trained in the Army are there to defend and protect other people. Yes, those are the kind of people you want, right? Who are dedicated to preserving American lives and defending them at all costs, even, at the risk of their own death. But obviously, Israel Keyes went a very different path using, I'm sure, much of what he learned in the military, to later commit these horrible crimes. And I mean, we've seen it before, obviously it takes all kinds in this world, and there's so many people in the military, like, it makes sense that some of them, are going to be, using this knowledge for evil, just like, even though the vast majority of police officers are good people who, serve and protect.
That's right.
We know of some that, turn into murderers, and they hide behind their official uniforms. And it's really, I think that just makes it even more disturbing to think about that, that they were trained to kill by the US government. And yeah, no, it's really awful. And Israel Keyes, he was patient. After leaving the Army in 2001, he was kind of living this normal life. He was living on a reservation in Washington with a woman. They'd recently had a child together, a daughter. And for years, he seemed normal. he was working in construction, raising a kid, and, it just didn't raise any alarm bells at that time.
Yeah, I mean, that is the fact that he couldn't have such duplicity is I mean, knowing what we know now
Yeah.
is terrifying.
Well,
Uh,
people, they talk about nature versus nurture with
yeah,
serial killers, especially. And I definitely have a lot of questions about his upbringing, about what kinds of lessons he was internalizing, early on, and the details that have come out, like his fascination with like hurting animals. Like, I just wonder, was someone modeling this behavior for him?
right,
Was there abuse in the household? Um, it
right.
seems to me that something had to have gone horribly wrong in his childhood for this to be, his choices in adulthood.
Right, and even, you look at the irony of him being part of bringing a life into the world
Yeah.
and, having a daughter and,
Yeah.
that disconnect of then taking lives, but
Yeah. Later on, he would say, that he stopped kidnapping and killing children after his daughter was born.
well, so
So
sure, okay.
yeah. Well, it's weird, right? That he has some kind of code, he has some kind of morals. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense in his head, but his that he would still continue to kill other people, just not kids. Well, they were all once someone's child, someone's
Correct,
baby,
they
and they
still
are someone's
remain
child. Yeah.
someone's child, yes,
Yeah.
so, yeah, the disconnect, uh, you know is ironic. But
It
so
is.
by just moving on in his history, by
Yeah.
2007, he'd moved to Alaska, started a construction company, and so entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, he began killing with chilling precision. He'd fly somewhere, rent a car, retrieve a murder kit he'd buried years earlier, kill someone, and then vanish.
So he was incredibly careful. He paid in cash, he turned off his phone or removed the battery, and was really conscious of avoiding surveillance cameras. That's part of why he wasn't caught for over a decade.
And what finally got him was his last known victim. So that was 18-year-old Samantha Koenig. She was working a late shift at a coffee kiosk in Anchorage, Alaska in February 2012, and he's abducted her at gunpoint.
So he sexually assaulted and murdered her the next day and left her body in a shed. Then he took his daughter on a 2-week cruise in the Gulf of Mexico.
Creepy.
I mean, talk about a disconnect.
Yeah.
When he got back, he actually staged a photo of Samantha, his victim, as though she was still alive. It's really, I mean, I can't believe this is real life. Like, it really sounds like an episode of like Dexter or something. Like
Yeah.
that, this would be, the killer that he was tracking. But it's reported that he used fishing line to sew her eyes open to make it look like she was still alive in the photo.
Mm.
Ugh. And then he demanded a ransom using the victim's phone.
So, I mean, timing wise, you leave a body in a shed for a week.
Yeah.
Doesn't the decomposition start? I mean, he must have really had
Well, it
some.
was cold. Remember, this is Alaska.
Yeah, I know yeah, I'm saying
Alaska in February. So
like,
that
oof,
body, it's as good as
it's a
it's in the
cryo
morgue.
protection.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually going to stay pretty, for a photo.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
it's
not
enough.
gonna be able to tell things like skin tone and, stuff
Yeah.
like that. If you were in Texas, that
Oh, yeah.
body, that would be a totally different story. But yes, he was able to um, convince her family that she's still alive, which is just, I mean, another trauma on top of the unbelievable ordeal that they're having to, go through here. Their daughter's missing, gone, for 2 weeks, and then you get this photo and you have this hope that she's still alive.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Oh, I mean, so obviously her family wired the money, followed instruction.
yes,
But that transaction gave police a lead, of course. And so over the next 2 weeks, Keys was also, I want to say sloppy, but
Yeah.
I don't think this guy does sloppy, so it must have been intentional. He, used her credit card in New
Yep.
Mexico, Arizona, Texas. He triggered ATM cameras. This just feels intentional, but also feels sloppy. So I can't reconcile that personally. But when
Yeah.
he was finally pulled over in Lufkin, Texas on March 13th, 2012, authorities did find Samantha's ID, her phone, and other incriminating evidence.
I mean, all roads lead to Texas, right? Like,
Or
of course
Florida.
they found him in Texas. So, yeah, I wonder if he wanted to get caught at this
Yeah.
point. He's been doing this for over a decade. And from what I know, about serial killers, they have a lot of pride in their work
Mhm.
and they actually want to get credit. They want to brag. They want someone to be impressed by them besides themselves. So, in custody, Israel Keys began talking and what he revealed stunned investigators. He described killing a Vermont couple, Bill and Lorraine Currier, in 2011. He told authorities that he'd flown to Chicago, driven 1,000 miles to Vermont, and then picked their house at random because it fit what he thought would make for an ideal kill scenario. It had an attached garage and they didn't have a dog.
Mm.
So he broke in and then took them to an abandoned farmhouse where he shot Bill and then raped and murdered Lorraine.
But and that's terrifying enough. He didn't
Yeah.
stop there. He hinted, again, I think this kind of plays at a power or control mentality, but he hinted at least 7 or 8 more murders, which I think at this point we can believe.
Yeah.
A couple in Washington, a victim in New York, likely a woman named Deborah Feldman who vanished in 2009. Another bank robbery in Texas,
Yep.
a kill kit, maybe used, maybe not, in Wisconsin. And the FBI believes he may have buried victims just all across the country.
Yeah, these interviews are deeply disturbing and they're also so chilling because he is extremely calm as he describes these horrific things. And I really think there's a smugness there.
Mhm.
So he claimed that he studied serial killers like Ted Bundy. I be inclined to believe that. He seemed to know, what would work. We know Ted Bundy, he would stalk his victims. He was very careful to choose people at the right time in the right place. All with the goal of being able to continue killing. Like that's what serial
Mhm.
killers, they have this discipline because to them the worst thing that's possible is getting caught and not being able to keep doing what they love, which is killing people. So it's just really hard to believe that people like this exist. But in one especially, disturbing note, um, Israel Keys talked about how he was building a house designed to hold captives. So this is like torn from the page of H. Holmes, right? Like from the 1800s, right? This murder mansion where he was going to, in his mind, have like the perfect place to do these dark deeds. So there's um, a lot going on in this guy's head.
Yeah, and he did own a construction company, so this is
Yeah.
not beyond the realm.
Oh, I know.
Oh, but so as he was talking to authorities, he was calmly telling them all of his deeds and hinting at more. And then he stopped cooperating. He hated the media attention and said he didn't want his daughter or his mother to suffer because of what he'd done. So there is a
Yeah.
conscience somewhere in there, but it's really selectively brought up.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah, selective conscience. So, he can feel for his daughter, his own mother, but again, no thinking that the people that he's killing, they have families too, right?
That's right.
So, yeah, and the idea that he hated the media attention, like I have a hard time believing that
Yeah,
just
I
because
don't buy that either
that's what
because
he
this is
said, but come on.
yeah.
Why
Yeah.
else is he talking? Why else is he talking?
Exactly.
Um, it kind of makes me think I'm getting like some Todd Kohlhepp
Uh,
vibes. So Todd Kohlhepp was a South Carolina serial killer that I covered for 48 hours on CBS, and he was a real estate agent. And
ooh,
so he would um, get people either like through showings for houses. He would like consider if he was going to kill these people, but a lot of times he would use his real estate business to attract people like on Craigslist to like clean the houses for him, or like, the idea that they were going to do like some kind of staging,
mm,
and he would get people showing up paying cash, no records, and then he would kidnap and murder them. And a lot of times, he would hold them captive for
ooh,
long periods of times, and that's how he actually got caught. So he had a woman in a storage container on one of his properties, and she was shouting for help and someone heard her.
wow.
So yeah, it's so it's so disturbing to think that you could go to some location and not know, that there might be someone hiding there. I mean, it's so rare, but
Yeah.
it does happen. So we get into the minds of these killers whenever they finally share their dark secrets and what they've done. And so Todd Kohlhepp eventually confessed, Israel Keys confessed at least to some murders. But in December 2012, before he could stand trial, Keys actually took his own life while in custody. So in his jail cell, he committed suicide. And next to his body, investigators found a note written in his own blood, along with a series of drawings. So he actually, used his finger, like finger painting,
Ooh,
and drew 12 skulls.
huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems hard for me to also seems hard for me to believe that he wasn't put on some kind of watch leading up
Yeah.
in case this happened. So I don't know what happened there. Uh,
Well, a lot of times people believe that serial killers, they're psychopaths, which I mean, he's definitely a psychopath, but that they won't kill themselves
yeah.
because they're the ultimate narcissist. They won't take their own life because they love themselves so much and they can't imagine it. Obviously, Israel Keys shows that that is not a 100% accurate theory,
Mhm.
because he he killed himself. And yeah, so yeah, he probably wasn't on suicide watch because he didn't display any signs of depression or self-harm, or he was acting like a very cool customer. So
Right.
um yeah, they left him alone and they gave him this opportunity, which really is tragic. Not because he's not here anymore, cuz got to say I don't really have any hard feelings about that, but I wish we could get, more answers from him.
Yeah, I mean, so some people believe those 12 skulls he drew, and then some people believe that those skulls represent 11 victims and himself, I guess, as the 12th
Yeah.
victim. And but the suicide note, didn't offer any useful clues, no names, no locations, just dark poetic musings on death and violence.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't even want to give like because his last words weren't anything to do with the victims, like the last thing I want to do is to like try to glorify this guy, or, it's disgusting. But the problem is Israel Keys took his secrets to the grave. With a timeline that stretches across 30 states. There are dozens of hotel stays, there's car rentals, there's flights. It's really difficult to believe we'll ever know the full scope of what he did.
Yeah, and that 2-week cruise in Mexico, I mean, you don't
Yeah.
know where it extended. You don't know what he was doing
Oh,
when.
totally. Well, yeah, when he gets off the boat,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And this is exactly why the FBI still needs the public's help. This isn't local to one singular state or one sheriff's department. This is truly nationwide. So the FBI is involved. They've released hours of, I don't know about hundreds, but hours of taped interviews, an interactive map of his known movements, information about rental cars, hotels, and towns he visited. So, anything that could jog someone's memory could really help potentially close a case.
Yes, and I'll put a link to that in today's show notes. If you think you might have any information about Israel Key's travel or possible victims, please contact the FBI or your local law enforcement.
So, to wrap this up, Israel Keys was, I think it's safe to say he's the boogeyman of our time.
Yeah,
And then, but the worst part is you wouldn't have seen him coming. He didn't
yeah.
look like a monster. He looked like, a contractor, a dad, a neighbor. And that is the scariest thing of all. It's, like what you said about the real estate agent.
Yeah.
You never know. That's what's so terrifying about
You really don't. Trust your intuition. Don't go anywhere with someone you don't know. If you get that feeling, in your gut, I think um it's just so hard to imagine, like, when these victims realize that they weren't with a normal person, you know?
Mhm.
So I hope that this episode leads to some more information. As disturbing as it is, I think it's really important that we talk about cases like this. Because justice doesn't end when a killer dies. For the families of the victims that still haven't been found, the search is far from over.
That's right. And we'll be back next week with another case. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep asking the right questions.
Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanama, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.